how everyone in my family treated me badly because they thought I was never gonna make it. People say family is supposed to love you first, but what if your family is the first place you learn pain? My name is Abena and this is my story. How I went from being treated like a mistake to becoming someone my family couldn't ignore. You see, I grew up in a small town outside Cape Coast in a house where silence was louder than kindness. My father was a mason, always covered in dust and sweat, and my mother sold vegetables at the market. They worked hard, but there was never enough. We were 4 children. My brother Kwame was the pride of the family, strong, loud, and good at football. Everyone believed he would one day make us rich. My sister Efua was beautiful and confident. Even when she did wrong, she got away with it. My younger brother Kojo was the baby of the house, always protected, always forgiving. Then there was me, the one in the middle, too quiet, too slow, too different. Hello everyone, welcome back to Layani Tales, and I hope you enjoyed today's story. Let's get right into the video. When I tried to help in the kitchen, my mother said I was clumsy. When I tried to study, she said I was wasting kerosene. When I stayed indoors, my father said I was lazy. If I went out, they said I was unserious. It didn't matter what I did. I was always wrong. I remember one evening when my father came home angry because his client hadn't paid him. He looked at me sitting by the door reading my old textbook and shouted, "You, always pretending to be serious with your useless books. When have your results ever fed this house?" The words stung more than the slap that followed. The truth is, I was an average student. Not because I didn't try, but because I had no peace. I studied by torchlight because my parents refused to waste light on me. I used my sister's old notebooks, the ones she threw away. I was always tired, always hungry, but I wanted something different. At school, even my teachers didn't expect much. I was quiet, shy, always sitting at the back. I didn't have nice shoes or a proper school bag. The other girls laughed at me because my uniform was faded and my hair was uneven. But I told myself, Abena, this is not how your story will end though. When I was 14, I failed my exams badly, badly. My father didn't speak to me for weeks. My mother, she said, "You see, some children are blessings, others are burdens." I tried to repeat the class, but there was no money. My parents said they couldn't waste fees on someone who didn't have a future. So they sent me to live with my auntie in Kaswa to help her in provision shop. Auntie's house was small, but her rules filled every corner. I woke up before dawn every day. I swept, cooked, fetched water, washed and opened the shop. I sold from morning till night, standing on my feet all day. If I made a mistake, she would shout, "You can't even sew properly. What kind of useless girl are you?" Sometimes I cried quietly while counting coins. She didn't know that I wasn't crying because of her words. I was crying because I had started to believe them. One night, while washing dishes outside, I heard her talking to a neighbor. She said, "My sister's daughter, that one is slow. She will end up selling on the roadside forever." I stood there, my hands shaking in the soapy water. That was the night I promised myself I would prove her wrong. During one of my evening rounds selling bread, I met Mrs. Ankoma, a teacher at nearby private school. She always bought bread for me. And one day, she asked why I wasn't in school. I told her everything. She listened quietly and then said, "You are not useless, my dear. You just need a chance." A week later, she introduced me to her headmaster. They decided to sponsor me with a half scholarship. My auntie wasn't happy about it, but she agreed because it made her look generous in front of others. Starting school again after 2 years felt strange. I was older than most of the students and I felt like I didn't belong. Some of them laughed at my worn out shoes and the second-hand bag I carried, but I didn't care. I studied like my life depended on it, because it did. I woke up at 4 a.m. every day to help at the shop before school. After class, I sold bread until 9 p.m., then studied my candlelight. There were days I was too tired to eat, but I refused to give up. Slowly, I began to improve. I remember the first time I taught my class. My teacher announced my name, and the room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me. The girl who used to sell bread after school, it felt so unreal. When I brought my report card home, Auntie looked at it and said, "Book doesn't cook food." She didn't even smile. I just nodded and went to my room. I didn't need her approval anymore. 3 years later, the headmaster called me to his office. He handed me a brown envelope. Inside was a letter of admission to the University of Cape Coast with a partial scholarship. I read it again and again and again. For a moment, I couldn't even cry. I just stood there shaking. That evening, when I told Auntie, she looked shocked. She said, "University, you? How?" I smiled and said, "I guess Book can cook food after all." She didn't reply. I packed my bag and left quietly the next morning. University life was harder than anything I had ever imagined. I worked part-time as a cleaner at a hostel and gave private lessons to children in town. I barely had enough to eat. Some days, I survived on gari and water. But every hardship reminded me of where I came from and where I refused to go back to. I studied late into the night, often sleeping in the library because my hostel was too noisy. There were times I wanted to quit. There were times I sat alone behind the lecture hall, crying silently, thinking about how nobody cared whether I made it or not. But then I would remember my mother's words, "You'll never go far." And that sentence pushed me harder than any motivation ever could. 4 years later, I graduated with first class honors in education. I was the only one from my department to do so that year. When I got my first job as a lecture assistant, I used my first salary to buy a simple phone. I called home. My mother picked up. Her voice sounded surprised. "Abena, my daughter, how are you? It's been so long." For a few seconds, I didn't know what to say. My father came on the line as well. He asked if I could send some money for the house. I laughed softly. After all these years, they didn't even ask how I was doing, just if I could help. I didn't hold it against them. I had learned that some people only respect you when you have something to offer. A few months later, I visited home. Everyone gathered around, pretending as if they had never treated me like a burden. My mother hugged me tightly. My father smiled proudly and said, "You've made us proud." Even my siblings were suddenly warm and polite. But deep inside, I remembered. I remembered every time they mocked me, every time they left me out, every insult, every rejection, every silent meal where I cried in my corner. Now, I teach at a senior high school in Accra. I see many girls like me, quiet, scared, overlooked. Girls who have already been told that they won't make it. I always tell them the same thing. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need one person, yourself. Sometimes I stay after class to talk to them. Some of them cry and say they don't think they are smart enough. I tell them that I once sold bread by the roadside and failed my exams. I tell them that success isn't about being perfect. It's about refusing to stop trying. And when I walk home in the evenings, I look up the sky and whisper, "You made it, Abena, you made it." Because sometimes the people closest to you won't see your worth until the world forces them to. And sometimes the most painful beginnings produce the strongest hearts. That's a very inspirational story from Abena. I want to ask you guys, if you were Abena, would you ever cater for your family? Will you just be selfish and just think about yourself? Because after all, her parents didn't even bother to take care of her. I don't know why some parents do that. Treat every child equally. Why do you have to have like favorites amongst your own children? So let me know in the comment section, what would you do if you were Abena? Will you ever mind your parents? Thank you very much. See you in the next one. Bye.